When God sends a message to earth, it's mercy to those who can receive it, but judgment to those who reject. All you have to do is think about Noah, and the picture becomes very clear. To spurn mercy, there nothing remains but judgment. Sadly, this is the condition of the church and the world today. February 29, 1964, the angel of the Lord spoke to Brother Branham and told him, pick up a rock and throw it in the air. As it fell back down to the ground, Brother Branham said, thus saith the Lord, you will see something happen right away. He told his friends that within 24 hours they would see the glory of the Lord firsthand. The very next day, on March 1st, a whirlwind roared through the canyon, ascending and descending over the Brother Branham 3 times. The tops of the trees were chopped off, and a portion of the canyon wall was blasted away. Strangely, the rocks that fell into the campsite all had a pyramid shape on at least one side. When asked what the whirlwind represented, Brother Branham told his hunting partners this visitation was a prophetic sign of impending judgment for the west coast of America. 27 days later, on Good Friday, remember that name, that judgment began near Prince William Sound off the coast of Alaska when a 9.2 magnitude earthquake followed by a huge tsunami took the lives of 128 people, caused millions of dollars in damage. Thus saith the Lord, followed that the judgments of God started in the earth with the Alaska earthquake and will not stop. The very next Good Friday, another earthquake struck the Seattle Olympia area in Washington, only 6.5, this time on the Richter scale. That very day of the quake, the prophet comments while preaching in Los Angeles on a message called The Choosing of a Bride. That great monster laying up yonder that flipped himself over in Alaska a few days ago threw his tail up again this morning along about down around Washington. He could head this way mighty soon.
I saw him get up from this table, and he went over and we had a shovel leaning up against a tree. So he picked up this shovel and he walked over to that rock, and he was shoveling dirt kind of to put the coals out, you know. And all of a sudden, we heard this whirlwind. And it was coming straight down out of the sky. And it was just screaming very loud, very loud. You could tell it wasn't anything natural. It was supernatural. But we didn't know what it was. We didn't know why or anything. And so I looked at Brother Branham. I was watching him. And he goes and he just looks up at it, pulls his hat off, and he stands there and looks right up in that. It came down about 10 feet off of the ground, right on the top of the little mesquite trees. And it was whipping those trees, just whipping them and whipping them, pulling rocks out of the cliff and throwing them all over the place. And he stood there, and every eye was glued on him, and it all of a sudden went away. It went right straight back up like it came, and went out of hearing. And he kind of acted as if he didn't know whether to talk about that or not. And so as he walked back over to where we were standing, he said, you know, one time God spoke to Job in a whirlwind. And that's all he said. Then later on that afternoon, then he began to talk about it being judgment striking the West Coast and so forth.
Now notice, he went in by the plan of God, foreknowledge, call of God, and the Word of God, and went in before the drought set in. Now, we know that judgment is ready to strike. Standing on the hill that day, Brother Bankswood standing here was walking up the hill. Maybe I quote it again. So that build your faith for this prayer line is fixing to take place. And next 10, 15 minutes. I was just walking ahead of Brother Banks. I think he had left Sister Ruby when she was sick. And he, coming behind me, I noticed his face red. I looked back, I thought the hill might be a little hard from the pull. So I kind of slowed up. Right in them deserts, right up the hills like that. Right where the angel of the Lord appeared, was heading right in that direction then. Where it appeared a few months before that. And as I went up the hill, the Spirit of God, when I turned around and looked on top of the mountain, He said, pick up that rock and say to him, thus saith the Lord. You'll see the glory of God in the next few hours. I just picked up the rock and said, Brother Banks, I don't know why. Threw it up the air and I said, thus saith the Lord. You're going to see the glory of God. He said, that meant Ruby? I said, no, I don't think it had anything to do with you, Banks, or Ruby, either one. I just think it was just saying, thus saith the Lord. Something's going to happen. And the next morning when we were standing there, many of the men, I don't know how many sitting here now, there's 12 or 14, 15 of us sitting there. All of a sudden, a minister walked up to me and he said, Brother Branham, he said, my name is so-and-so. Said, I was one of your sponsors in California. I said, I'm glad to meet you, sir. Douglas McHugh. He said, I'm glad to meet you. Shook hands with him. He said, well, now, I want to ask you a question. Said, Roy Roberson, trustee here, Brother Woods, Terry, and Billy, and Brother McAnally, and I don't know who all were standing there. And he said, I want to ask you something. He said, does the Lord ever give you visions out like this? I said, yes, brother. But I come out here to kind of get away from it, to rest up. And I looked around like this, and I seen a heavy-set doctor looking at him and said, Reverend McHugh, this allergy in your eye will soon put your eye out. I've doctored you for 2 years, and I can do nothing about it. And I turned around to him, and I said, what you asked me that for? Your doctor told you the other day that allergy was in your eye. It was middle of the day, about 11 o'clock, and he's wearing sunglasses. I said, the reason you're not wearing that because it's the sun, it's because of your eye. He told you you was going to lose that eye, and he started crying. So that's right. I turned to walk around again, had a shovel in my hand. And I looked, I see him standing there looking at me, his eyes just as bright. I said, but thus saith the Lord. You're not going to lose that eye. I was hunting with him this last fall. He could see better than me and anybody in the crowd. You know? And I seen an elderly lady pull down her stocking and raise up the side of her skirt. She said, son, if you see Brother Branham, tell him to pray for my feet. And I looked down there and little tumors hanging on her feet all around. I said, your mother's a gray-headed lady. My son, you see. She told you before you left, if you see me, to have me to pray for her feet. She's got little tumors like hanging over her feet. He likes to faint it. Said, that's the truth. I said, tell her not to worry. It'll be all right. I started walking around, then I heard the voice of God speak, said, get out of the way quickly. Roy Roberson standing there knowing he was a veteran of the war. I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, Brother Roy, hide as quick as you can. So what's the matter? I said, get out of the way, hide. And just started walking around, put my shovel down, turned around, took off my hat, and here he comes. Glory of God falling in a whirlwind that tore the side of the mountain out like that. It blasted and shook the place like that, cut the top of the bushes out just about 3 or 4 or 5 feet above my head, went back up like a funnel like that, and blasted again, and here it come 3 times. Then when it left the 3rd time, Brother Banks come over and said, that's what you was talking about. I said, yes. I said, what was it? I said, God appears in whirlwinds. I didn't know whether he wanted me to tell the people or not. And I went on and prayed a little bit. Then he told me I could tell him. I said, it's judgment striking the West Coast. Look at her today. Look what happened a few hours after that. Alaska sunk, and now the whole thing is going under. We're entering into the judgment. Mercy's been spared. But thanks be to God, we got hidden food, spiritual food, that we're living on the goodness and mercy of the revelation of Jesus Christ in these last days, vindicating Himself among His people. Amen. They went in. Elijah went in before the drought set in. Thank God for being in before the judgment sets in. Now's a time of coming out and going in. Getting out of those organizations, getting into Christ. Coming out and going in time for all true believers.